It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, Electrical, Plumbing, Heating, and Air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Good afternoon. Welcome on into Cougar Sports Saturday from Lawrence, Kansas. Site of BYU versus Kansas today here on KSL News Radio. It's a top 15 clash with high stakes. Every game's got high stakes in the Big 12, but this one has a little bit extra sizzle. We're talking about it over the next 90 minutes as we get you ready for tip-off between BYU and KU. I'm your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, here with KSL News Radio and KSL Sports. And joining me today, Nate Slack in Salt Lake City. And, Nate, this is a massive game. And I got to say, Nate, it's pretty wild. 2 years ago, I think a lot of Cougar fans thought going into this league, can BYU win games in the Big 12, and fast forward to year 3 in this conference, and a game against BYU is one of the biggest games on the schedule for a blue blood like Kansas. It's a pretty awesome spot for BYU basketball to be in.
It's still hard to believe, Mitch. I'm thinking back to the days where BYU was flirting with the Big 12 and there was all the rumors going around. And the first team that BYU fans always talked about BYU playing in basketball was Kansas, right? Like that's the cream of the crop in the Big 12 conference. I think coming off the game against Arizona too, where they're top ranked, and then if you look forward to next week and BYU's playing another top 10 team in Houston, like this is it's an incredible time to be a BYU fan. BYU, just covering BYU. Man, it's going to be a fun day.
It really is, and it's the 1,000th game at Allen Fieldhouse, and walking through the Hall of Fame at Allen Fieldhouse, you feel the history. I'm someone that's had the chance to go to a lot of different venues around the country, and I got to say, I'm obviously biased to the Marriott Center. I think it's one of the underrated gems in college basketball, but it's pretty surreal when you see the Peach Bucket in Allen Fieldhouse. You see James Naismith. You see Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, the Big Dipper. I mean, the who's who of basketball has come through the halls of Allen Fieldhouse, and today will be game number 1,000 inside Allen Fieldhouse. And, of course, College Game Day is here for this game. It's a massive, massive contest, and it's got two maybe superstars, guys that are going to be on Hall of Fames, the faces of programs in the future, in A.J. Dybantsa for BYU and Darryn Peterson for Kansas. The availability report came out last night. Darryn Peterson, who's been dealing with an ankle, he is not on that availability report. So that would indicate, Nate, that it's going to be AJ versus DP, and this is going to be a must-see event.
Yeah, I cannot wait. The College Game Day was great this morning, talking about the matchup. I've been trying to think about a game where I was this excited for a BYU basketball game. There's always been fun games. Like you think back to the Gonzaga game in 2020, San Diego State 2011 is probably the game I would go to is the most excited I've been for a game since this one. And that's the one at San Diego State. But it just feels like BYU's in a position right now to do things that they've never done on the basketball court. And we've talked about this in past weeks, but BYU still kind of, despite the high rankings and the high expectations, they're kind of lacking that big win this season. They've got some good ones against, Clemson and Villanova, but they need like a marquee win. And I think this would be like a great opportunity to really show the nation what BYU can do and kind of validate those high expectations that they have.
A.J. Dybantsa is leading all Power 5 players, because you include the Big East in basketball. He's leading all Power Conference players in scoring this year. He's second nationally in scoring at 23.6 points per game. In Big 12 play, he's averaging 24, leading the Big 12, of course. Darryn Peterson not far behind in Big 12 play, averaging 23.1 points, shooting 42% from three. Darryn Peterson can knock it down all around the floor. And, of course, AJ, he's so efficient, looking to bounce back in this game after maybe disappointing by his standards shooting night against Arizona, the number 1 ranked Wildcats. But AJ versus DP, Kevin Young doesn't believe that's the key to this game.
Those two going head-to-head, no, I don't think that's the key to the game at all. I think us executing our game plan, which obviously he's a large part of, is wildly important. But they've played a lot of games without him, and a lot of other guys, I think, have found confidence and so forth. So, just having to execute the game plan, like I said, with him clearly being a large part of that.
I love the fact, though, Nate, that this is a matchup of potentially number 1 versus number 2 in the NBA draft. But I do agree, though, with Kevin Young that it can't just solely be about AJ versus Peterson because BYU as a team has got to show up and have a complete performance to get this win at Allen Fieldhouse.
Yeah, and I think it comes at a good spot for BYU. I know that AJ and Rob Wright didn't have the games that they wanted to have against Arizona, but if I think back to the Texas Tech game, AJ didn't have his best game either. The following game against Utah, he goes off for 43 points. Yep. So I think BYU's in a good spot, and especially coming off of the game that Kennard Davis had, Mood Davis, against Arizona with those 5 threes. He hit 5 in a row. I think he went like 18 consecutive 3-point misses, yes, and then he bangs 5 in a row. So I think BYU's in a good spot where they got some momentum with them, maybe a little chip on their shoulder after coming up just short against Arizona. But I think this BYU's in a good spot, and I think KY is right. It's not. I don't think the AJ and Darryn Peterson is the key to the game, but I think it is going to be a big part of it.
It's definitely tantalizing, that's for sure. And you got to think all the NBA personnel and staff that are going to be at this game are going to want to see that matchup. Even some legendary Kansas players like Paul Pierce, they're here for this game. So a lot of people want to see that matchup. And AJ, as you noted, Nate, he responded well after a subpar performance against Texas Tech with a 43-point effort against Utah a week ago. I don't think anyone would be against AJ going off for another career high in this setting. This was Kevin Young, though, on how AJ's responded this week after a tough performance going 6 of 24 from the field against Arizona.
Great in practice. That we've had 2 outstanding practices the last few days. And so, sometimes you look at a game and you're like, oh, how you evaluate a game, if a guy played well or didn't play well. Oftentimes I think it's really easy to go to shot making, particularly for, stars. And that's life, right? You got to make shots to win. I thought, there was probably 4 shots he took I didn't love. The rest of them are shots he's made at an extremely high clip. They didn't go in. So I don't necessarily say, oh, he had a bad game. He didn't make shots, but I thought he did a lot of other things well.
After reviewing that Arizona game, it is true. I mean, AJ had open mid-range shots that are his bread and butter, Nate, and he wasn't hitting them. I mean, he was just off. And credit to Arizona. BYU hits 13 threes in that game, and you're thinking this is going to be a perfect spot where, BYU is forcing Arizona to jack up more threes than they're used to. But their style of play is so unique and so efficient, and defensively they're really effective too. Arizona's excellent. I don't think Kansas is as good as Arizona, but I'm curious to see how AJ responds today.
Yeah, are you concerned at all? Do you think that Arizona may have found some holes in his game, or do you think it was more of just an off game by AJ?
I really think it was an off game, Nate, because I just think that what we've seen thus far has been so efficient by AJ. And, the game against Texas Tech, I thought that was a little bit of the maybe I'm going to chalk up to officiating. I'll say it, because he only went to the free throw line one time, and you're thinking this guy's getting bumped and, knocked around, and he's only gone to the line one time, or else he would have had another 20-point game in that one. I think AJ, his competitive drive and his whole persona about ball is life, and that's really all he's about. That shows up, I think, today, where I think he'll be able to tune out the whole Darryn Peterson storyline, and you can't tell me that he doesn't want that bad, because that was a big talking point during his high school career. But I just think one of the underrated aspects to AJ is he is so effective as a team guy. He'll find a wide open Moo Davis. He'll find a wide open Alexi Kostic for a three. He is more than enough content with doing that. He doesn't want to have to shoot 24 shots if he doesn't need to. And that's what gives me confidence that he'll bounce back in a big way, potentially today, but really in the weeks ahead, because whatever happens today, BYU is still aspiring for something really big this season, but you do need to get some signature wins in the regular season to put yourself in a position to have an excellent seed in the NCAA tournament. Let's take our first break. It's BYU Kansas game day from Lawrence, Kansas. We're getting you ready for the Cougars and the Jayhawks, a top 15 clash in the Big 12. We'll hear more from Kevin Young next here on Cougar Sports Saturday. Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday, a special extended pregame coverage of BYU versus Kansas right here on KSL News Radio. Mitch Harper, Nate Slack with you today as we're breaking down this big-time matchup between two top 15 teams. And it's pretty crazy, Nate. BYU, you would have thought when they joined the Big 12 that taking down Kansas in football would be a breeze and taking down Kansas in basketball would be as difficult as it was for BYU to take down Gonzaga, but it's been the complete opposite. Football can't take down Kansas. They'll get another crack at the Jayhawks coming up this November in Lawrence. I saw the construction being worked on with their football stadium right now, phase 2 of their big renovation project. And then the first 2 years in the Big 12, BYU has not only beat Kansas, last year they handed a 34-point loss to Bill Self inside the Marriott Center. Then 2 years ago, they won in Allen Fieldhouse with Mark Pope. So BYU's had a lot of success against these Jayhawks.
It's shocking. And what the thing that is a bummer about it is basketball, you have, the margin of error is so much larger because you don't get punished for losing to good teams. You don't get the big reward because if BYU beats in Arizona, they're going to skyrocket in Ken Palm in the net. If they lose, they're not going to fall that much. Football, obviously you have fewer games, and so they mean a little bit more. So, I may have traded that 2024 loss to Kansas in football for a loss in basketball last year, but unfortunately, I don't get to make that call. But it has been crazy to see how dominant BYU has been against Kansas over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, 2 years ago, Richie Saunders was part of that game. Dallin Hall had a big shot over Hunter Dickinson, one of the great shots, I think, in BYU history. And that was kind of a game, honestly, that maybe gave a little bit of momentum and juice to the candidacy of Mark Pope for Kentucky, which all of us are happy with now because Kevin Young is just a masterful coach and so excited to see him operate in this setting. And it was cool yesterday to be in the Allen Fieldhouse, Hall of Fame and see a big picture of Joel Embiid and think Kevin Young's coached that guy. He's worked with that guy. Even Kevin Young said that he came out to Allen Fieldhouse. They had an NBA preseason game with the Sixers in Kansas City, and Joel Embiid showed KY and the Sixers organization his old stomping grounds at Allen Fieldhouse. But KY hasn't coached on the sidelines in Allen Fieldhouse. He'll get that opportunity today. Tip off at 2:30 between BYU and Kansas. And Kevin Young probably wants to see this BYU team jump out to a quick start against the Jayhawks. BYU this year has not been a great first-half team. KY weighs in on why that's been the case where his team performs better in the second half.
I think the number one factor is we just have to execute and focus, I think, a little bit better than we currently are to start games.
That would be huge for BYU to get off to a strong start. What do you attribute the issues for slow starts for this BYU team, not only in Big 12 play, but really throughout this season, Nate?
Yeah, his comment's interesting because I've always just thought it was adjustments. I have a lot of respect for Kevin Young and honestly the entire coaching staff. And so I had always thought that it was just adjustments made at halftime, but it sounds more like it's just guys not coming out quite mentally ready. I don't know if maybe it's the environment. I don't know if it's just a matter of getting in the flow of the game. I would probably lean more towards that maybe. And kind of a side thing, I think the number of foul calls in college basketball, it can get hard to get into a flow.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like there's no rhythm, and so maybe you can kind of attribute that where, yeah, it's tough to get things really rolling, and maybe after playing 20 minutes and then having a little bit of time to reset and then get back out there, maybe it makes a difference. But I still lean towards adjustments being a major thing. I think that's, Kevin Young is a really humble guy. And despite all of his accolades and his success coaching big players, I think a lot of the adjustments that BYU's made has made a big difference. I can't remember if it was against Texas Tech, I believe, but they were struggling at one point. They switched defenses. They went more to a zone, and it made a big difference. But I think adjustments is probably the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, the Utah game, they went to a zone in Salt Lake.
That was it.
In the Huntsman Center, and it was really effective. And you're right, this coaching staff does a great job of adjustments, but this team has had some just issues with these slow starts. Hopefully today they have a great start, because I'll tell you, Nate, I think this crowd is going to be super energized. Talking to some people around the facility yesterday, just some fans, and they are super hyped for this game. Like, this is one of the most exciting games in conference play that they've had in a couple years, maybe since Texas a couple years in their final send-off at Allen Fieldhouse. But A.J. Dybantsa and Darryn Peterson, huge game where everyone's going to be watching that. This is Kevin Young on if he feels A.J. sees this game as bigger than some of the others that he's had during Big 12 play thus far.
Not really, man. I don't look into it that much, and I just look. What I've noticed being around really good players for my whole life, pretty much, is I think all that stuff is way bigger of a deal to everyone that's not the player. Now, like, does he want to go out and play well? Yeah, but I don't think he's, going through this and going through that and blah blah blah. Like, he wants to go win the basketball game. Of course, he wants to play well. But I don't think it's as, like, scrutinized in his own mind as probably the media and so forth makes it out to be. But, look, I understand it, too. It's a big game, right, in terms of narratives, I've had a bunch of executives I've seen in Kansas, this and that. So it's like everyone just knows what it is if you're inside. But it doesn't, like, rule your life. You go play the game.
That's BYU head coach Kevin Young. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll get to know the foe, the Kansas Jayhawks edition. We'll also hear from Bill Self coming up a little bit later in the program. This is Cougar Sports Saturday on a game day. Mitch Harper, Nate Slack with you here on KSL News Radio.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Cougar Sports Saturday rolls on here from Lawrence, Kansas, to get you ready for BYU and Kansas. Love this matchup in Big 12 hoops. It's one of the best games every single year. We were talking in the break, Mitch Harper here and Nate Slack with you. It's a shame that the Big 12 did not line this game up twice this year. Should have been a home and home this season, especially with the AJ and Darryn Peterson element, but still only one contest. And to get to know these Kansas Jayhawks, I caught up with Henry Greenstein of the Lawrence Journal World, and he gave the lowdown on these Jayhawks.
Appreciate you hopping on board with me today. Has Kansas become the team that everyone in the Big 12 expects them to be finally?
I mean, certainly the vibes are much higher than they were a few weeks ago when KU was 1-2 in league play, coming off a dispiriting loss in West Virginia, and Darryn Peterson's status was in doubt, and people were like, where does this team go from here? Is KU going to be on the bubble now? And then they responded by rattling off 4 straight wins. The one at home versus Iowa State, which was number 2 at the time, really kind of got them headed in the right direction. They then proceeded to beat Baylor and then go on the road and take down Colorado and K-State in pretty convincing fashion. So suddenly the sky's the limit, I guess. And Peterson's expected to be back for this weekend after missing one game due to an ankle sprain. So, I mean, the process of integrating him with the other players is still ongoing, and it has been for much of the season because he was hampered by a hamstring and then by cramps. And while he was gone, the rest of the team kind of formed a pretty good defense-based identity, and then they had to adapt to bringing him back into the fold and kind of getting used to having that level of scoring threat on their offense and deferring to him in some situations and still commanding the ball in others. But I think maybe the team hasn't reached its full potential quite yet, but there's certainly reason for optimism. And this game against BYU is going to go a long way toward determining how seriously KU is viewed as a threat to be one of the top few finishers in the Big 12 by the end of the season.
When you bring up, bringing Darryn Peterson together with this team, I think back to that UCF game when he was on the bench nursing his hamstring. I kind of thought in that moment, it's just this, is this never going to work with Darryn Peterson in his one season with the Jayhawks? But it seems like it has turned around. There was that moment too against TCU with the ball goes thrown out of bounds. I'm just thinking, will this ever be okay? But it seems like since that UCF game, it really has turned the corner maybe with Darryn Peterson.
Yeah, so what's interesting is he didn't really get through a full game until Colorado, which was all the more improbable because he sprained his ankle midway through that game, and that's the one he plays through to the end. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the back and forth of the first couple months of this season, particularly once it got into the phase where he was dealing with cramps, and he'd get through maybe 28 to 32 minutes and then have to come out at the very end of a game. And, that cost KU on some occasions, including in that UCF game you mentioned. That was probably the low point in terms of the whole Peterson availability story. But it does seem like they've turned a corner, especially with, obviously it was a bit, demoralizing for all involved that as soon as he gets through a game, he has to miss another one due to a different injury. But things are trending well for this weekend. We'll see if he can get through a whole healthy game against BYU when he's probably going to have the biggest spotlight on him that he will at any point this year, with the possible exception of the NCAA tournament.
And I wanted to follow up on that, Henry, because with that angle of number one versus number two potentially in the NBA draft, do you think DP might be pushing it a little bit in this game and maybe trying to force up those shots? Because him and AJ have had some spectacular games against one another in high school. Do you think he's going to be really aggressive coming out of the gates in this one on Saturday?
Yeah, they certainly have gone to head-to-head in some memorable ways. Obviously, everyone remembers the one where AJ had 49 and DP had 61 in the game winner from last February. That will be one of the key questions of this game is how much does it become DP versus AJ instead of KU versus BYU? Peterson's a humble, workman-like guy. He keeps his eye on the ball. I don't think that consciously he'll be trying to show out. But there is a certain element of, okay, you got some pretty competent teammates. You want to get them involved. Same with BYU, which has a really, really solid starting lineup. But, for a lot of this year, it felt like there was kind of one version of KU, and I alluded to this earlier. There was kind of one version of what KU looked like when Peterson was on the floor and one when he was off it. And before the ankle injury, we started to see those get closer and closer together. There were games where, for instance, in that UCF game, Peterson scores 23, I believe, in the first half. And in the second half, he's hampered by injury and only gets 3 points. Well, Melvin Council had 0 in the first half and 20 in the second half, I'm pretty sure. So it was a lot of Council wasn't totally able to function to the best of his ability when Peterson was on the floor, which is a little bit ironic for a guy who had said he wanted to be the Robin to Peterson's Batman. Now it kind of feels like that partnership is closer to coming to fruition, and it will need to be. For KU to do well in this game. It can't just become going back and forth, especially because, I understand DP's an unparalleled scorer, but it feels like in terms of the size Dybantsa has, that's more of an ostensible matchup problem for KU's defense than Peterson is for BYU's. So they'll both need to get their teammates involved and prevent this from just becoming 2 players and instead make it 10 players.
Who do you think gets the initial assignment on AJ from Kansas? Is it Tiller or is someone else? Who do you think it'll be?
I think Tiller is probably the favorite. It's tough because he hasn't, one thing Self says basically every time Tiller is brought up this year is they're asking him to guard on the perimeter. He's never had to do that. A lot of that's been because KU hasn't switched 5 all year. In fact, their switches were kind of torn apart in those UCF and West Virginia games, and that's why they went away from it for a little bit and started switching just between the 3 guards and the 2 big men. But because they've switched 5 a lot, it's forced Tiller to be out on guards, and he's not 100% comfortable with that yet. It does concern me a little bit with how much ball handling AJ does, and how much time he spends out there, even though obviously his strength is at getting into the paint. But will BYU see that as an opportunity for AJ to get past him and get free driving to the paint and get people into foul trouble and all that? So we'll see exactly how they go with it. I definitely would think that Tiller and White would be the primary 2, but especially if KU does switch 5, everyone will have their own role to play in dealing with him. And I don't really think that this team has like a clear-cut. I mean, who does have a clear-cut answer for who are the defensemen? But I certainly don't think KU has a clear-cut answer in terms of like physicality or body type.
Henry, with this matchup, how maybe motivated is just like the fan base to get some revenge on BYU? I mean, who would have thought that Kansas football was the one knocking off BYU and BYU basketball is the one knocking off Kansas when BYU joined the Big 12? But that's been the case the last 2 years. BYU's been 2-0 against the Jayhawks. Is there any element here where the fan base is almost, who would have thought, like fired up for a BYU game?
Well, I guess I have kind of a 2-pronged answer to this. Number one, absolutely, the fan base is incredibly fired up for this. I mean, there was a tweet going around from the account that manages KU basketball camping groups. There are 109 camping groups for this game. I know that doesn't mean anything to anyone who isn't around the program, but that's a lot. And the way the camping works is essentially like throughout the day, one student from your group has to be in the lobby of Allen Fieldhouse at all times, like for a long period leading up to the game, basically. But 109 camping groups. The game against Iowa State had a lot of anticipation, but I think because of the DP versus AJ angle, because of all the alumni that are coming back, because of all the scouts that are going to be here, this is one of the most anticipated games of the season. It might be the single most up to this point. I mean, UConn, I guess. KU ended up losing that one in narrow fashion, much like BYU did in Boston. But I think this might be the most anticipated game of the season thus far. I don't think it's because of the revenge factor. I think just this, the last 2 years were marked by a consistent core of players, and those players are no longer on KU's team. And, for BYU, there wasn't that much consistency at all because of the coaching change and all that. But the one thing that was consistent was that they killed KU pretty soundly. So I think people view this year as kind of a clean break with the previous 2. Flory Badunga is the only player who is on scholarship who played any minutes last season. So I don't know that the revenge element is going to be too significant in anyone's mind, but I definitely do think that there is an incredibly high level of anticipation. And it's kind of a role reversal when you think about how usually the KU game is one of the most anticipated for anyone on the road. Well, this home game against BYU has become one of the most anticipated right here in Lawrence.
And how do you feel Kansas matches up, not only with AJ, but the big 3 of BYU, Richie Saunders and Rob Wright? Rob Wright had a huge game against Kansas last year with Baylor, that big comeback. How do you think Kansas matches up?
Yeah, that was the biggest comeback KU's conceded in program history. They were up 21 before halftime. Got outscored, I want to say 60-30 in the second half of that one. That was a grim day in Waco to cover that one. But I actually think KU's pretty well suited to guard Saunders and Wright, just because their defensive guards have been really strong this year. I mean, for all the talk about Council and his ability to get to the rim and his ability to push the pace and transition and all that, he's probably best as a defender. And when you think about the steps forward that Marco Jackson is taking on the defensive end, Self and the coaching staff have been really keen on imparting to him that because of it, that his athleticism and his lateral quickness, that should be his primary role, and any scoring is a bonus. I think he's kind of, in his first year, Jackson, and Jackson redshirted last year because he had tore his patellar tendon. In his first year before that, it was too early for him. It was too quick for him to be thrown into the fire, and he didn't impress all that much as a starter in the early stages of that year. This year, as a role player, he's been really, really good as a defender, and particularly in getting steals for a team that continues to be one of the worst in the country at forcing turnovers, which is a bit of a weakness for KU. But between Council and Jackson, And Peterson is also really good at the defensive end when he's in. He's a bit raw on that end, but obviously has the tools you'd want. Between those guys and how skilled they are at switching with each other, I feel like Wright and Saunders, they should have the pieces in place to handle them. Now, granted, the gravity that Dybantsa creates is such that you won't always get the exact matchups you want, and KU's going to have to be really disciplined. But I do think that they are well suited to handle those two. But the eminent issue is handling Dybantsa more so than the other two.
He's Henry Greenstein. You can check out his bylines at the Lawrence Journal World, KUSports.com. Got full coverage, football, basketball, all things Kansas Jayhawks. Follow him, and looking forward to being there in Allen Fieldhouse on Saturday, Henry, and looking forward to a really, I think, historic day here at Allen Fieldhouse.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I'll look forward to seeing you then, and certainly going to be a high-stakes Big 12 battle.
That was Henry Greenstein of KUSports.com and the Lawrence World Journal. Taking a break, we'll get to hear from Bill Self, Kansas head coach, on his thoughts on A.J. Dybantsa and this matchup of DP and A.J., BYU and Kansas, right here on Cougar Sports Saturday. Cougar Sports Saturday rolls on here on KSL News Radio. If you miss any part of the program, make sure to subscribe to our podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, just search Cougar Sports Saturday, search BYU Cougars, BYU basketball, BYU football. We're pretty much available anywhere you get your podcast on audio format, or you can go to the KSL Sports app, KSL News Radio app, so many different ways to listen to the show, and appreciate all of our live listeners too on 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, the KSL News Radio app, and KSLNewsRadio.com. So it's BYU and Kansas, 2:30 p.m. tip right here on KSL. Mitch Harper and Nate Slack with you. We were thinking here in the break, Nate, this A.J. Dybantsa, Darryn Peterson matchup, it is a must-see event. There's going to be so much NBA attention on this game. It's going to be insane. I think our minds are going to just erupt at the idea of all the takeaways and narratives from this game after today. Got us thinking, though, some of the other great player matchups in BYU history. Are there any you can think of like this?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this, the first one that came to mind for some reason was Trayvon Willis against Jimmer in 2011. So the old guard from UNLV, and I remember I pulled this up. There was a quote from Trayvon Willis. He says, they've got a preseason All-American. He's talking about Jimmer, and supposedly the best player in the conference on the other team. So that's going to be nothing but fun. But I remember there was so much beef for some reason. And it wasn't like he was some star player. I mean, he was really good for UNLV, and that UNLV team always gave BYU troubles. But that was the first one that came to my mind.
That's a good one, because you're right, those UNLV teams were a thorn in BYU's side. Obviously, Jimmer versus Kawhi. I think that's the easy one to point to because Kawhi was a freshman, going to be a lottery pick. Jimmer turned into a lottery pick, and those two obviously different NBA careers. Kawhi's been a two-time NBA Finals MVP. Jimmer, he just didn't work out in the NBA. Like, we all have our takes as to why that happened. Still, it didn't work out. We can even go deeper in the weeds. Trent Playstead, Tyler Hansborough. But what this shows, again, is like BYU's in a different world in terms of basketball where you're getting these superstar matchups that almost the whole basketball world wants to see. And a guy that's been around these type of matchups a lot in his basketball career is Kansas head coach Bill Self. And he was asked earlier this week if A.J. reminds him of anyone he's had or gone up against in the past.
I don't think that he reminds me off the top of my head of anybody we played in the past. He's, he's ridiculously talented. He's long, and he can take, two strides to everybody else's three. So he has a tendency to be able to step around you to create separation to get to a shot, and he's, he can score from beyond the arc, but he's certainly so good in the mid-range lane type area. But he's a terrific talent. We've played other terrific talents here in the past. I don't know if we played many if any, that you would look at from an athleticism standpoint, and say that he doesn't, fit a mold that you would look at as, some of the greatest NBA athletes out there, because it's 6'9", and I don't know what his wingspan is, but it's got to be well over 7, and to be that explosive and everything. He's a terrific talent.
That he is, and his wingspan 7'2". AJ, I love the take of he can take 2 steps to everyone's 3, and that's so true because AJ makes difficult things look so simple the way he moves. And I think sometimes that gets taken for granted. Darryn Peterson, a little more compact to guard, can shoot it all over the place, but AJ is special, and BYU needs him to be great today.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think of with AJ and his size is there's been a number of times throughout the season, and even last game against Arizona, where it looks like he's kind of stuck in a spot, and he uses just his long legs and has a beautiful drop step, and he ends up having a wide open layup. And it's like how many guys in the country, even in the NBA, could first of all have the idea to make that move, and then to be able to execute it without traveling and without running a guy over and drawing a charge, or charging over a defender. It's crazy that BYU has this level of athlete, and he's doing it against top tier teams.
And BYU is trying to get more of these on an annual basis, maybe Bruce Branch next year, but trying to be the new factory of one and dones potentially, like Kansas has been many years in the past. And Kansas, of course, will have Darryn Peterson, and we'll see if this continues going forward. Kansas is going to have a heralded recruit today, expected to be at Allen Fieldhouse. Tyron Stokes expected to visit, so there's going to be some high-profile visitors on the Kansas side, and maybe AJ can steal the show and it'd be a great spectacle and add to the lore, the aura of AJ, who just turned 19 earlier this week. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll get to the three-pointer. We'll go give some stats, some players to watch, and some bold predictions for this BYU-Kansas showdown as we count down to tip-off right here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday, live from Lawrence, Kansas, getting you ready for BYU versus Kansas. Allen Fieldhouse will be the setting of today's big-time matchup between two top 15 teams that are looking to be in the hunt for the Big 12 championship, but more importantly, elevate their profile for the NCAA tournament. Mitch Harper, Nate Slack with you. Nate coming to you from Salt Lake City, and I'm here in Lawrence. I'll have coverage inside Allen Fieldhouse on KSLSports.com throughout the day, so make sure to download the KSL Sports app. And got to say, Nate, this is a hot ticket for this game. Being around Allen Fieldhouse yesterday, it was the calm before the storm. College game day was getting set up yesterday, and obviously that took place this morning. Students were camping out, but this is going to be an electric atmosphere here today in Allen Fieldhouse.
Feels like every BYU game has been that way. Ticket prices are super high. I'm looking at SeatGeek right now, and it looks like the cheapest ticket I can find is $187,
Whew.
And that's in the upper bowl and the nosebleeds. You're not even facing the court; you're facing another section of seats. It's insane. I can't believe BYU's in this spot.
It's pretty cool. And, walking around Allen Fieldhouse again yesterday, it was kind of fun to be there for a second time. I was there 2 years ago for that game winner, or game that BYU won 2 seasons ago, where they pulled off the upset in Kansas, which was the 7th-ranked team in the country. It was kind of fun this time around to have a little bit of a previous knowledge of Allen Fieldhouse and then see if what I remembered was correct. It was noteworthy. I noticed that Kansas redid their concourse, so they now have some new amenities, yet they still maintained the historical charm of Allen Fieldhouse. So I thought that was a really cool touch. But you see the Hall of Fame still. You see all the renovated concourse and some standing areas for people to kind of gather. And I kind of thought to myself, that'd be really cool at BYU games at the Marriott Center if somehow they could maybe extend the concourse, having a little bit of standing area where people can enjoy their Cougar tails, maybe enjoy some of their snacks and treats at BYU games. But it was fun too to also walk around Allen Fieldhouse and then see the Naismith Lounge. I'm thinking, that's why James Naismith created this sport to have a lounge, a bar named after him. Nonetheless, though, it was pretty cool to see the upgrades at Allen Fieldhouse, because I was really curious to see if they could maintain the historical charm of the building, and they sure did. It's a great venue. It really is. Like any Cougar fan, you've got to take advantage of the opportunity to come out to this game. When I hear that ticket price, that's a lot of money. But I just think it's worth it because this place is pretty awesome to watch a college basketball game. I can't wait for today.
I hate to hear you say that because I was in Lawrence for that football game in 2023, and we talked about going to go check out the stadium to see if we could peek inside and just kind of look around. Didn't end up making an effort to go out and look. And it's one of my biggest regrets because I was right there. It was a 10-minute walk away, but so, yeah, thanks for rubbing it in, Mitch. Hope you enjoy your game and appreciate it.
It is. I hate to bring up an old wound, and even that football game in 2023 was brutal to begin with. I mean, that was such an ugly game with Kobe Bryant, not the Lakers legend, the DB getting that big hit on Parker Kingston and a scoop and score. But it's been better days on the hardwood for BYU against Kansas, and the Cougars will be looking for another great day here in Lawrence once again. And man, I'll tell you, Nate, the cold weather, it is nasty here in the Midwest. Nasty Midwest weather. I'm thinking to myself, 20 degrees. That's super cold, but we've dealt with 20 degrees out in Utah. It's different in the Midwest, man. It is so dang cold. This morning it was 9 degrees here in Lawrence. So I'm glad this game is indoors, and it should be a pleasant 72, 73 degrees inside Allen Fieldhouse for this one. Let's dive into the matchup a little bit further with our three-pointer, where we get some stats, some players to watch, and some bold predictions. Let's start with a stat to watch in this game. What do you have, Nate?
I'm going to go with 46.8, and that's the average number of points that BYU scored in the second half in conference play. And that's a huge number. It feels like we're not too far away from times where BYU was scoring, 70 points a game total. And so to be scoring almost 50 points in the second half of Big 12 games, that's pretty notable to me. So I think 46.8 is where I'm going to go. Curious to see where you go with this one, Mitch.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 12.3. That's the average number of turnovers BYU has committed per game in Big 12 play. That's good for 14th out of 16 teams. BYU needs to do a better job of taking care of the basketball. And this Kansas team has been a little bit better defensively. They got some confidence heading into this game. Now, turnover-wise, Kansas, by comparison, they're about 9th in turnover margin, so not much better. Both these teams have a negative turnover margin in Big 12 play, but valuing possessions, taking care of the basketball, that's going to be key here for BYU, and trying to limit the offensive fouls that end possessions and change the momentum of games. BYU's got to take care of that basketball. So guys like Rob Wright, Richie Saunders, AJ Dybantsa, ball-heavy guards, got to take care of that rock for BYU. Players to watch in this game, I'll start things off. I'm going to go Moo Davis for BYU. I really want to see Moo continue to build off that success he had in the second half, and hopefully it's not just a one-game flash in the pan, because remember, this is a guy that's been viewed as a 3-and-D player, someone that maybe in a best-case scenario could be maybe a two-way contract one day, maybe a G League player. This is a guy that this coaching staff views in very high regard beyond just simply shooting the three or defensive play. But his asset right now for this team is that 3-and-D and be able to knock down those threes, because he's going to be open. When you've got a big three like he's playing with, he's going to have open looks. So knocking down those threes, not being fazed by the big stage, huge to watch him. And then for Kansas, I'm going to go with Melvin Council. He's become kind of the heart and soul of this team. St. Bonaventure transfer. One thing that stands out about this Kansas team compared to the last 2 years with the Jayhawks, I think they're a better group, I think, in the locker room than these past 2 years. I mean, Hunter Dickinson, the past 2 years, he was a, great player in college, but it just seemed like Kansas didn't have much chemistry at all. There was a lot of misfits in that transfer portal that they were trying to add and put a square peg in a round hole. I think this Kansas team gels quite well. Melvin Council, he's been more on the ball a lot in recent games, so it's not as ball dominant with Darryn Peterson. Melvin Council's one to watch. He's kind of got that dog mentality that even Kevin Young has referenced about other players in the Big 12. That's that guy for Kansas, so keep an eye out for Melvin Council, who's become kind of a Kansas favorite in recent weeks.
I'm going to go with Mihailo Boskovic for BYU. A guy off the bench, a little bit of an underrated guy, I think, just because his stats, he's never going to light up the stat board. He can bang a couple threes here and there, but he's only averaging 3 points a game this season. He's hit a three-pointer, though, in each of the last 4 games. And then I've been getting flashbacks to last year's game in Morgantown at West Virginia. And BYU had an opportunity to close the game late. And Boskovic is the guy who ends up getting an and one to go up by 4, in the final second. So I think Mihailo can have a really big impact in this game. I think that BYU's been really reliant on the big three, and that's gotten them, 17 wins so far this season. But I think in a game like this, you want guys to be able to contribute off the bench, and I think Mihailo can do that for BYU. As far as Kansas goes, I'm going to go with their big guy, Flory Bidunga, 6'10", 235 pound big man. He's averaging 14 points a game, 9 rebounds. He's tied for 3rd in the country in blocks per game at 2.5. What's a crazy stat is through 7 games in conference so far, he has 25 blocks. So he has 3.5 blocks per game in conference play. And that can be troublesome because we saw against Arizona, Rob Wright driving to the basket. Yeah. He's really shifty, but once you get in the weeds and, he's only 6 foot, he's listed at 6'1", so, probably 5'11", 6 foot range. It could be difficult for a guy like that. So I'm thinking honorable mention for BYU would be Rob Wright, just to see if he's more of a drive and kick kind of guy instead of going up for those baskets. But those are my 2 players to watch. What are about bold predictions for you, Mitch?
Yeah, and just to add on Bidunga too, number 1 in the Big 12 in field goal percentage, 76.8%. So when he's putting up shots, it's going to be a high clip. So, he's been a really efficient player on the offensive end for Kansas. Sometimes a mixed bag with Bidunga, but in Big 12 play, he's been really good. Bold prediction for me, I'm going to say Dybantsa hits a clutch basket in the final 30 seconds of the game. Now, I'll give my score prediction coming up in the next segment, but I think AJ hits a clutch shot. And look, we've seen that at times this season. AJ's got some clutch factor to him, and that's something you want to see for a high-profile NBA draft prospect. You want to see that clutch gene, and I think he's going to show that because I think this is going to be a close game down to the wire. AJ or someone for BYU is going to need to hit that big shot. I think there were some lessons learned in the Arizona game that AJ ultimately needs to be the guy, or Richie if, Richie's available. He was fouled out in that moment against Arizona, but AJ with his length, he's not going to get a shot blocked. He's got to be the guy, and I think he hits a clutch shot late within 30 seconds in this game. What about you? What's your bold prediction?
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go with BYU's big 3 combining for the same number of points that Kansas typically gives up, which is 67 points. So I think 67 points is super attainable for this group. I think they're going to bounce back nicely from kind of a rough performance against Arizona. So I'm going to say 67 points by AJ Dybantsa, Rob Wright, and Richie Saunders.
I like it. Let's take our final timeout, and on the other side, we'll give you our score predictions for BYU and Kansas as we count down to tip-off right here on KSL News Radio. Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday here on a BYU basketball game day from Lawrence, Kansas. Mitch Harper and Nate Slack with you, getting you ready for this big-time matchup in the Big 12 with BYU and Kansas. It's time for our score predictions. We'll toss it over to Greg Wrubell and Mark Durant here shortly for the call that you can listen to right here on KSL News Radio and the KSL News Radio app. Nate, does BYU get it done? Do they get their third consecutive win over Bill Self's Kansas Jayhawks, or do the Jayhawks extend their 4-game winning streak to 5? What say you?
I think BYU is going to pull it off, Mitch. I'm going back to my days. The last time I predicted a BYU loss on this show came against Boise State in football in 2022, and I've promised myself, I promised my child, I cannot do that again. So I'm predicting a BYU win. I'm going 84-80 BYU. I think it's going to be a close game, kind of what you teased in the last segment. I think AJ hits a big shot late. I think it's going to be an up and down game. The thing that concerns me is that BYU's been giving up a lot of runs, and they haven't had a lot of runs to counter. But I think BYU is going to be able to weather the storm. I think it's going to be a super difficult environment. College game day this morning, I think everybody's pretty fired up. And when you've been camping out in the cold that you mentioned earlier too, since Tuesday, I think that place is going to be juiced. But I think BYU is ready for it. I think they've had plenty of tests this year, and I think they finally notch their biggest win of the season so far.
I'm with you, Nate. And by the way, just real side note here, you said last time you predicted a BYU loss was 2022 football, so you didn't even pick a loss in 2023, that bad football season?
No, Mitch, because I learned my lesson.
Okay.
Apparently not. I didn't learn it very well, but here we are.
Okay. All right. Hey, look, I like the pick. I'm with you, though. I'm going with BYU to take down Kansas. I'm going to say it's a 1-point game. I'm going to say BYU 79, Kansas 78. I think, again, AJ's going to have a clutch moment. I just feel it. I just think AJ is going to rise to the occasion and step up in a big way in this game. And it's not necessarily going to be a 43-point night, I don't think. I mean, AJ's more than capable. But I think he's going to be highly efficient. I think there's going to be aspects to his game where people, the NBA scouts, the NBA, talking heads are going to fall in love with, this pass that he made. This, next level thinking, basketball IQ, because that's something that's so underrated with AJ. And that's got to shine in a game like this where Kansas, they're so good in Allen Fieldhouse. They've only lost 16 times since 2010 in this building. I mean, they are super good, and they're really good after a week's worth of rest. 122-36 in the Bill Self tenure with more than 6 days of prep for an opponent. So it's a tricky spot to get Kansas, but I think BYU gets it done. It'd be the first time this season that BYU wins a game as an underdog. They're 0-3 in those spots this year. But I'm with you. I just think this BYU team, when they have a little bit of adversity, they respond quickly under Kevin Young. And after that loss against Arizona on a Monday night, I think BYU responds and gets a massive win and really becomes the talk of the nation this weekend and maybe next week. Because if you go into Allen Fieldhouse and win, I don't care who it is, Kansas is just so difficult. I mean, they could have you and I in that starting five on it with a Kansas jersey, and we'd still have a chance to win games with how good they are in Allen Fieldhouse. So I'm going to go with the Cougs to get it done.
I've seen your jump shot, Mitch. Don't sell yourself short. I believe in you.
I believe in this BYU team, and I think all of Cougar Nation does as well. That's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Sports Saturday. We'll toss it over to Greg Wrubell and Mark Durant for the call of BYU versus Kansas right here on KSL News Radio.